life is here. Springtails are thriving. How often and how much should I feed them? Well, good question. Tell me a little bit more about your setup. If they are just by themselves, that's going to be different than, say, if they're with isopods and so on. If they're in a vivarium, that would make a difference from they're just in a springtail culture and so on. So remind me of how they're set up, and I'll totally give you some more details on that. They can typically go 5 days without food. It will usually influence their reproduction and so on, but in most situations they can go that long. I see that Paul Large Marge Morphs is here as well, and 503 is here. Welcome back. Cindy's Bella's Buggy Bags. Oh, I like that. Welcome. Joseph Tavir. I'm doing pretty well today. I am hungry. I poorly timed my lunch, so I'm gonna have lunch after this. But I just had a little bit of an energy bar, so hopefully I'll be okay. Laura Philippe feeds springtails weekly, which is, that's totally a good way to do it, depending on your goals for your springtails. Yeah, it's very possible, and what you're feeding and all that. There's Chet. Welcome. Isopods is here as well. Great. Roland Johnson is here. Oh, 503 was writing a message and something went wrong apparently. Anyway, we might as well play Guess the Isopod while we're at this. If anybody knows exactly what type of isopod this is. Pardon me while I finish my energy bar. I'm going to get away from the microphone for just a second to do that so that I don't run out of energy while we are live. Okay, I'm back, and like 503 said, that she feeds her springs monthly, but they're in soil, so they have food there. So yeah, that's part of the key. You may have a setup where you don't need to feed your springtails directly because they're getting a multitude of food sources from everything in the enclosure. Frank the Tank, hey, welcome, and yes, please hit the like button. And 503, once again, you got it. These are indeed Porcelia laevis. How now? They are munching away like their relatives in, all the Porcelia laevis, as well as Porcelia afflavis, like dairy cows and many other isopods. These are not particularly shy in daylight conditions, especially when the colony is robust, and will quite happily eat under good lighting. So that is what's happening here. I can focus in a little bit, might be a little bit more effective for you if you can see them close up. They do look quite a bit like milkbacks in many respects. They look quite a bit like dairy cows in many respects, but not quite either. You can see on the left side that it looks like a male mate guarding a female, or perhaps attempting to mate, probably mate guarding, I don't know. Could be one or the other. So double gluten, interesting name there. How do you keep the wet side of the box from wicking to the dry side? Well, most substrates will wick a little bit. That's just going to happen. But if you keep, if there's enough distance in the enclosure, a 6-quart enclosure, for example, or this 16-quart enclosure, for example, unless you really, really, really soak the wet side and saturate it, the wicking's not going to be so horrible that it's going to make the dry side wet. That is my experience with most substrates. If you overwater it, grossly overwater it, that could happen, but unless you are grossly overwatering, you're just going to get a gradient where the wettest part is the part you wet down, and then a little distance from that, it's going to be a little less damp, but still slightly damp. Move a little further away, maybe a little less damp, and then it'll just get to the driest side, depending on the type of isopod. So hopefully that helps. So I've never had a problem with that as long as it's not grossly overwatered. Oh, thank you, Double Gluten. I appreciate the sticker. Love it. It doesn't give me the option to like it, but I do like it. I just can't actually push a button. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. I'm not sure if that has to do with the quantity or whether it's a sticker or what, but there we go. So I appreciate that, Double Gluten, and I hope that is helpful. How many of you out there have kept How Nows or do keep How Nows? Are there any How Now owners here? I really like them. I feel like, oh, that makes sense, Frank. You can't like or comment on stickers. So I just like it with my heart, and I don't necessarily have to push any buttons. There you go. I really like the How Nows. They're very similar to dairy cows in a lot of ways. They don't breed quite as crazily, I feel like, and their bodies are just a little bit less like tanks. Dairy cows are a little bit more maybe robust, a little bit, but not that much. My Therapeutic Life. Great to see you. And I talked about your comment at the beginning, and I appreciate that. So thank you for commenting, and great to see you, even if you can only pass by. And Little Red Angel, good afternoon, and that's awesome. Thank you for joining us for your first time. I appreciate it. Oh, that one looks, let's see. I'm just looking at that individual right there. Looks quite a bit lighter than the individual under it. Frank the Tank, I love that. I don't have any How Nows, but maybe I'll get some How Laters. Love it. So Double Gluten has Panda Kings, Klugii, and Zebras. Ooh, excellent ones to start with. And Little Angel recommended by my friend Garden Mechanics. Okay, that name sounds familiar. Jana Hinrichs, what an unorthodox time for you to be live. Happy to catch a stream. Yeah, during the summer I try to stream earlier because one, I can, but two, and perhaps more importantly, for the viewers who are not able to catch my later lives. Most of the year, 5 o'clock my time is the earliest I can stream as a practical matter. But during the summer, because of work schedule changes, basically I'm off for a few weeks in the summer. I can do that. So I do that for the benefit of all of those who are unable to attend the later streams. Let's see, Little Red Angel, new to the hobby. Well, welcome. I am glad you're here, and I would love to know what you're keeping and how you got into the hobby. Did you get into the hobby through Garden Mechanics? Let's see. So Cyberspace Cosmonaut says, my powder oranges made it through the dry winter in my arid enclosure. Pretty resilient. They are super resilient. There are a few isopods in the hobby as resilient as Porcellanides pruinosus, which is the species to which the powder oranges belong, as well as orange cream, Oreo crumbles, powder blues, whiteouts, and so on. There are lots of forms of that species now, but yeah, they're all equally resilient. Glad they did well. So Little Red Angel has dairy cows, Dalmatians, powder blues, and Thai angels. Pretty cool. And Yana, thank you. I'm glad the mic is doing well. I did purchase a new mic. I was testing this one. This is my old mic. I have my new mic if we need it. I'll switch over to it. But I was testing this one because as I have been recording since we had that issue, my recordings have gone well, so it may just have been a glitch from that day, and I wanted to test that out. So if we're sounding good, great. If anybody has any audio feedback that it's not sounding good or whatever, I'd like to hear that, but so far so good. But I did go ahead and buy that mic as I promised I would in case we need it. And it's all charged up and ready to go. So, Vermilion Ivy. Would Armadillidium granulatum be all right in a planted terrarium, or would that be too wet for them? If so, would driftwood and stuff off the ground be enough for them to kind of have a dry side? That depends on a lot of things. It depends on how humid that vivarium is going to be and so on. I think having like how much airflow you have in there, how much airflow is in the room, how much humidity, ambient humidity in the house, lots of things would change that. I would say granulatum is probably not the best choice for vivarium if there's not decent airflow, because they do tend to have molting problems in my recollection, to the best of my recollection, if they don't have a decent gradient. So not to say you couldn't do it, but it might not be the kind of vivarium you want. It might have to have too much airflow. So we'll see. Okay, hopefully that helps. But I don't know. I mean, you could try it, but I would say they might have some molting issues. So let's see. Armadillidium for more arid regions? Not necessarily. Some are, and some prefer. Some do really well in arid setups, and some don't. That's just been my my experience and the information I've heard about Armadillidium granulatimus. They prefer it a little drier. They prefer to have a dry area, and so some Armadillidium do really well without a dry area. Like Nasatum tends to do pretty well without a dry area, but some, it changes. So it sounds like several people, Frank the Tank, Tima, welcome Tima, by the way, are saying the microphone is sounding good, so. Oh, the cherry blossoms, yeah. I think those are still fairly expensive here, too. So, Keeping Fish 2, welcome. Oh, so those cherry blossoms are expensive, yeah. Yeah, vermilion ivy, the cubaris, many of the cubaris seem to do really well in high humidity, and so that may be a better thing to do. I would go with that. Yes, Chet has some other suggestions too. Orange Dalmatian, Porcellio does really well in terrarium conditions that are fairly moist and humid. They were very widely used for dart. I think they still are pretty widely used for dart frogs. So it's very humid, and there's not a lot of airflow, not a huge amount of airflow in most dart frog vivariums, and the humidity is extremely high, and they do really well. And orange Dalmatians that Ched's talking about are indeed Porcellio and Isopods tarragona. I've worked with them a bit, haven't for a while, but that makes sense that they'd be doing well too. Wow, 300 euros for 10 individuals. Shoot, that's expensive. That must be the cherry blossoms you're talking about. So My Therapeutic Life says I've got zebras, Armadillidium gestroy, orange creams, blue powders, Punta Cana, dairy cows, red calico, must be reproducing quite well. I have enough now. Cool. Sounds like a good assortment. You've got some Armadillidium, you've got some Porcellionides, you've got some Porcellio. Yeah, it's a pretty good variety. 3 different genera that are fantastic to keep, and they're very utilitarian as well, typically. And you got some of my favorites in there, so there you go. Good taste. So we're watching the Porcellio laevis how now, but we can also look at other things. Keeping Fish 2 has a question. I have some isopods, but I don't have any calcium source for them. Do I need to have some kind of calcium supplement for them? They absolutely need calcium. Where they get their calcium is, well, it's a complicated question with a complicated answer, but let's go this way. Okay, they absolutely need calcium in their diet. Their exoskeletons are partially composed of calcium. Without calcium, they will die. But a real mixed leaf litter, if your leaf litter is really mixed, they'll get a decent amount of calcium from that. So if you just use one species of leaf, you might not be getting enough calcium, but say you have half a dozen species of leaves of various sorts, it is likely that they will be able to get sufficient calcium as long as you provide ample leaf litter. Also, some foods contain calcium. Many fish foods, for example, a major ingredient of them is fish meal, and that has some calcium in it. However, for several reasons, I do recommend supplemental calcium. Pieces of cuttlebone can work, finely crushed eggshell can work, powdered calcium carbonate can work, and I've used all of those. They can work. You can add prilled dolomite, which is a type of limestone, to your substrate. Part of the reason for that in the substrate is that it tends to help with pH and regulate your pH, which is a good thing. And then they can also nibble on it if they need to get extra calcium. But one of my preferred methods is just pieces of cuttlebone, because they readily eat it, and you can tell when you need to replace it because they eat it down to the shell, the hard side of the shell. One side of a cuttlebone is rather hard and the other side is quite soft, and so they will nibble down the soft side until there's nothing left but the hard side, and then you know it's time to replace it. So you could just put a chunk in and do that. But I would definitely say you absolutely need calcium, but if you choose to do it with a supplementary source such as cuttlebone or finely crushed eggshell or calcium carbonate powder or something like that, is up to you. But it's more like insurance if you use something like cuttlebone, that they're getting enough. And also if you use things like prilled limestone dolomite in the substrate, that will help regulate the pH. And it seems to help with certain conditions, like Kyle Candillion of Roach Crossing. I know his website is called Roach Crossing, and he works with a lot of roaches as an expert roach keeper, but he's also been in the isopod hobby longer than most people, including me. He was keeping and breeding isopods before I was, and he has indicated that when he puts the prilled dolomite limestone in his isopod setups, he notices that he does not have issues with certain conditions like porcelain disease. So, oh, little red angel, yeah. Snail shells will be a good source of calcium as well. And oyster shell can work too, as long as it's crushed finely enough for the isopods to eat them. Things like seashells, like this seashell you can see in here, it's a scallop shell. That's not going to be a great source of calcium for my isopods because it's not crushed. But if I were to crush it finely enough, they could eat it. But right now, I could leave it in there for years and they wouldn't eat it. Same with chicken eggshells, pretty much. If you put a chicken eggshell without crushing it finely, they're not going to do much with it. I've left not crushed, but just like an eggshell that is cracked and open in a isopod enclosure just to see what they would do with it. And I can leave it in there for months and months and months, and there's basically nothing going on. But if you crush it finely, they will eat it. Let's see. I see we have Droth is here. Welcome, Droth. Been a bit. Good to see you here. So, my therapeutic life. No idea what to do with coming or likely overflow barring problems. By September, October, I'll have several well-established splits. Any suggestions appreciated. Well, there's some things you can do. I have experimented with this in several ways. I mean, it's nice to be able to export those isopods. For me, for most of my cultures, I just export them, meaning I'm selling them. And that may not be something you want to do, or something you want to do on a limited basis. I think I recall a conversation with you where you sold some isopods, but that is a really easy thing, because then I find myself, oh, I don't have enough, rather than I have too many. But isopods, if you are regulating the food to a certain extent, they will regulate their population. Like we give a lot of times in the hobby, I feel like we give so much food because our point is to raise as many isopods as possible in a small space, and so we give a lot of supplemental food. If you reduce that supplemental food, or you don't keep increasing it too much, like let's say I choose a certain quantity to feed these isopods, and I realize this is how much supplemental food they will eat in 6 hours, and I give that to them twice a week. And then I make sure they have plenty of leaf litter. And I do occasionally change the substrate out and so on. But I will find that there's a certain population they will reach, and they won't go a lot beyond that. They might go a little up and down here and there, but that has been my experience with isopods that I keep in a certain size enclosure and regulate the food quantity over time. With a lot of isopods, even like Porcelia laevis, I have a small enclosure that I have kept in my office. And I provide a certain amount of food, I measure that food, and I provide it, I don't really exceed that amount of food because I don't want them to exceed the space. And I do see them reproducing once in a while, but not crazy. Not all of those babies grow up. Some of them do. Some of the adults die off with time. And it sort of self-regulates to an extent. Some isopods will do that less than others. Some will get incredibly dense. But if you kind of play with that, that can help. Having something that will eat the isopods, of course, is another way to do it. That can help as well. If worst comes to worst, and I hate to suggest this, but it is a possibility, and I don't do this method, but if you find they're really going crazy and you're having problems because they're reproducing so crazily, you could take out a quantity of them and put them in the freezer, but I don't really recommend that because I think it's very sad. So I don't think you will come to that point if you regulate the food sources and stuff. Okay, so Droth, with the Isopod Exchange Reddit, have you used that to get rid of an extra isopod? I have not used that. Has anybody else used it? OG Original Gecko, welcome. Yeah, that's true. Local schools, science centers will sometimes be interested in it too. Good, yeah, my therapeutic life, I wouldn't be freezing them. I don't do it. Some people resort to that, but I only do that for my substrate once I've taken out as many isopods as I possibly can, just for safety. That's when I do that. But Blake A, greetings from Southern Ontario, Canada. Awesome. That's another thing too, Craigslist or your local online classifieds. I have sold isopods on my local online classifieds. We have one that's just like for this state and a couple of surrounding states or whatever, and so I won't give you the name because it won't help you, but that one really helps. I've sold quite a few things. I sell a lot of Daphnia there too, different things like that. Yeah, there's definitely some mate guarding going on. Me too. They're doing this very frequently. And Tennyson, welcome. Yes, these are indeed How Now, the ones that Kyle sent me. Well, the descendants of the ones that Kyle sent me. So, yeah. So welcome, Tennyson. Let's see, did I miss anybody else? I'm trying to make sure I welcome everybody. I welcomed OG Original Gecko, right? They're totally burying. It's funny to see how they bury their food dish. There's still plenty of food on there, but they're dropping all sorts of leaf bits and whatnot on it. Ah, Droth. Okay, Orange Crush, do you or anyone? I got my shipping permit. Okay, well, with Orange Crush, I unfortunately found that I couldn't ship them across state lines, so you may not be able to either, unless they've made changes to the permits recently that particular species is not allowed. I applied specifically for that species, Armadillo officinalis, to ship across state lines and was told that it is illegal to do so. You'd have to have a containment facility. Maybe you have one, and maybe that's what's going on. But 503, my leopard gecko must have heard your voice. He came out to explore during his usual nap time. That's awesome. Little Red Angel from Birmingham, England. Ah, cool. My brother was there many years ago for a short time. Let's see. Okay, yeah, there's just, I believe, 21 species, unless the permits have changed since I last renewed mine. 21 approved isopod species. All of them are species that are known to be established somewhere in the U.S., and Armadillo officinalis, unfortunately, is not one of them. I love Orange Crush. I rehomed my colony because of that, because I'm trying to focus more on species that I can ship. I do have a few that I can't, but in general, I'm just trying to focus on that. Okay, somebody wanted to see some, what was it? Big Pine Key? Yeah, I can do that. I'm gonna make it happen. I am moving things about so that I can make that happen. By the way, those of you who helped me cull out some of the super yellow Armadillidium maculatum, that's working out pretty well. A lot of them are growing up. Some of them are not as yellow, and some of them are. So we'll see how that goes. So 503 says, mine is so funny. I moved him to a 4x2x2 bioactive in the living room, and he's loving all the extra interaction and activity. That's awesome. It's interesting how We had for years people would say things like, oh, leopard geckos need to have a small enclosure like 10-gallon or 20-gallon because if you put them in something bigger, they'll get lost and they won't find their food and whatnot. And it turns out that that's not true at all. You do need to be careful about how you do it, but if you do it right, they love it, which is awesome. And thank you, My Therapeutic Life, for joining in. Let's see. I think I missed somebody else join. Piers, there it is. First time here. Welcome. New to Isopods via my grandchild. Very cool. What is the best way to transfer to new home? My plan didn't go so well, so I dumped them in new home. Depends on what they are in before you put them in their new home. Generally, if it's like a paper towel, I just lift out the paper towel, maybe with forceps or just my fingers, and just set it in the enclosure, and I open it carefully and just make sure everything is removed. Maybe use a soft bristle paintbrush to brush them out. If it is like a substrate, like a sphagnum moss or whatever, I generally move the entire thing, all of it, just into the new culture. If it's sphagnum moss, I drop it onto the moss area in the enclosure. So it kind of depends on what you're working with. Yeah, we should take a look at the anemone, Tennyson, today. I think that would be a good idea. High coverage anemone, yeah, they're high coverage ones. I actually put them with my other anemone because I wanted to try to improve the quality of the expression of my other colony too. So I figured by putting the ones with your father in there, I could get some genetic diversity in there and hopefully cause some higher expression individuals in the colony as a whole. But we can take a look at those. Oh, he's had the stock throw pearls. Interesting. I have to keep my eye on that. Okay, mine would use every inch of it in big enough enclosures I can give them. I bet. I believe it. Maximalist for all my animals. Can we get an update on the garters and maybe the dart frogs? So I have spoken about the garters in recent streams, I think. But unfortunately, I lost my breeding stock of garters this year. And, well, some of it was last year, some of it was this year, but it's been horrible. So yeah, I was dealing with several problems, got some veterinary treatment, had some just complete surprises, like surprise deaths that had like nothing going on at all. And then I finally got reptile mites, which thankfully I no longer have and was able to get rid of those. But I lost my breeding stock of garters by the succession of various things over the past approximately a year, which is horrible. So I don't have good news about the garters, I have horrible news. I think I talked about that in a recent stream, but I might as well say it again because not everybody heard it. My dart frogs, on the other hand, are doing just fine. My dart frogs are doing great, but yeah, it was kind of horrible. Well, welcome, Max. Good to see you again. I'm glad to hear your Espanol, your Klugai, and the Gestoy are all doing well. So I'd be more interested in hearing more about the mate guarding because I had learned, and maybe what I learned was incorrect, but what I had learned is that the males will mate guard because after the females are mated by that male, there's a possibility for another male to come in and inseminate that female and so on. And so it makes sense for the male to guard the female for a while so that another male cannot mate. However, if there's more information about that, I would be interested in knowing about it. So Little Red Angel. As far as I know, there aren't really parasitic mites for isopods in the same way that there are for reptiles, but there are certainly mites that can be pests in your enclosures. Things like grain mites can be pests in your enclosures. And basically what they do is they just grow to plague proportions and they eat a lot of the food, and they can get all over the isopods. With some species of invertebrate, they can do something called a hypopus stage, when they molt in sort of a suction cuppy shape and attach themselves to things like roaches or other invertebrates, and it can be very irritating and even difficult for the invertebrates to breathe, and that doesn't seem to happen much with isopods, but that kind of grain mite can be, that kind of mite can be an issue. But as long as you have a balanced culture, you're not overfeeding and so on, you have springtails to help out compete the mites, that seems to help keep things safe. I've never had such issues with my isopods, the hypopus stage, never had that. I haven't had grain mites be much of an issue for years and years and years. When I first got into isopods, I would see too many grain mites, but as I learned to make sure springtails were, a big part of the equation, and that learn not to overfeed, that seemed to really help solve the problem. Well, this is interesting. And the nuptial ride and the mating and mate guarding, there's three different things going on. Nuptial ride is, as I understand it, is before they mate. Mating, there's actual contact with the male's modified pleopods to insert sperm into the female, and then mate guarding is what can happen after, but I'm learning something new. Maybe mate guarding is not as common as I had been led to believe. So Yana, if you have a couple mites, which are brown, shiny, very ball-shaped ones, that does sound like they're probably grain mites. If there are just a few of them, it's not a big issue at all. If you notice them growing to plague proportions, it probably means that there is too much food available to them, and you could drastically reduce feeding so that isopods can finish it off before the mites get to it. And make sure to add those springtails, and that will help. Okay, that's very interesting. So nuptial ride is basically kind of a pre-mating courtship behavior, but that is very interesting. So we don't see so much mate guarding except for certain species. Very interesting. Learned something new. So Max Cantrell did some freshwater surveying recently, had some cool things including water scorpions, many diving beetles, and even a fish louse. Ooh, interesting. So Max, was the fish louse on a fish, or just was it free living? Okay, so Ligia and Hilaria also exhibit a form of mate guarding. Cool. Mate guarding. Okay, I have some isopods to switch out here. I'm gonna switch out these. They're done. They're not done eating, but they're done in the spotlight, so to speak. I'm gonna move something else in just a second while I replace them. It was a request for Big Pine Key from Frank, I think. Okay, interesting, Max. Yeah, there's a lot of freshwater isopods that are not fish lice, so I was wondering about that. That they're just free-living freshwater isopods as well as the true fish lice. So I was wondering. Look at that one on the left, how much yellow expression. I would call that yellow anyway. These are looking good. So Yana says, It's not too many, just always notice them in egg cartons and the spaces between the enclosure lid and the tub itself. I find them yucky. I don't feed much at all and only water the moss. Okay, well, that's probably why you're not getting a lot of them. Do you have springtails? Because the springtails will help out compete them in general. I don't know that I've seen as much as a grain mite in my enclosures for a long year. I have seen Orobatid mites, and I have seen, what are some other mites I've seen? I've seen the soil mites, which are predatory. At least some of them are. Some of them are predatory. Ooh, there's a whole bunch of them right there. Okay, then the springtails should be helping too. Yeah, like Frank says, I love the variation of color and pattern. There's a lot. I especially love the ones that have the skirts, I think. But they're all just gorgeous and so much variety. They're breeding well. So toe. Well, it's nice to see you again as well. I think I'm trying to heart that. There we go. It's nice to see you again as well, and I'm sorry you've been having a hard time, but I'm glad you are able to join the chat and that it brightens your day. Yeah, these actually have variable leg colors, which can be hard to see in this kind of setup, but there you go. Well, I really appreciate that, Toe, and I'm glad that you can join us. So, Cat Jam, we do have a Discord for patrons. I'm not active on it, but it does exist. I just find I don't have time to be on Discord, but we do have that on Patreon. You never get the notifications, Toe? Interesting. Well, for the summer, for the next couple of weeks, I'll be streaming on Mondays at this time, starting at noon my time. And after that, I'll probably go back to Tuesdays, but we will see. And I might change to Mondays or something. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but probably go back to Tuesdays at 5 p.m. my time. And let's see. So another way to do it, Cat Jam, is just send me some pics on Instagram. Go to Aquarimax Pets and just DM me some pics and ask for some advice, and I'd be happy to help you out if I can. Let's see. Looking at the chat, it says, Vink P. Russ, I loved your appearance on Animals at Home podcast. Opaiula is extremely fascinating. Thank you for teaching me about it. You're welcome. I really enjoyed appearing on the show again. That was my second time on the show. I had done an Isopod episode as well, and it was really fun. So I'm glad that Dylan was willing to have me on the show again. So Droth, there is a link in Patreon. You have to scroll back a bit to get to it, but it should be there. And if you can't find it, just let me know on Patreon and I'll send you a link. YouTube does some really goofy things. It won't notify you necessarily when it says it will. You can click the bell for all notifications and it might show you some of them, but it won't always. It's just a weird thing about YouTube. They say they're going to give you all the notifications, but they don't, for whatever reason. Okay, so Major WD. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that one. Currently in the process of purchasing supplies for Opaiula. Cool. Yeah, I've actually since Clint had me on and I did that Opaiula episode with him on Clint's reptiles. We've had a lot of people buy Opaiula materials and Opaiula from me. A lot of them. So Toe, you usually get the notifications an hour after I'm done. That's no fun. I'm trying to make the notifications more, make them more in advance. I think that would be more helpful for everybody. I just haven't been great at doing that lately, but I will try to do better. We'll try to do better about that. Let's see. I'm just checking to see if there's something else that y'all would like to see. Maybe over here. Oh, sorry. I got something I want to check on, so I'll bring it over. I will still entertain requests if at all possible. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. It's the garbage truck coming by. Okay, well, we can definitely look. At some of these others people are requesting. Sorry, the garbage truck, I hope that wasn't too loud when it was coming by. I've got the window open because we've got the cooler going. This is Porcellia dilatatus rust. Just going to pop this over and look at all these wee ones. Most of these are not adults, but there are adults in there, down in the substrate. You know, these are good. Fossorial isopod. One of the better cleanup crew isopods out there. And the fact that they are now orange, there's an orange morph of them, makes me happy. So, Porcellia dilatatus rust. These came to me from Easy Eddie some time ago. Colony's doing well. It's just they're rather secretive. They tend to hide a lot, but they're beautiful. Let's see. So I see cyberspace cosmonaut saying, must have been cool visiting Clint. Absolutely. I really enjoy visiting Clint every single time. I hope to do it again soon. I've done it many times. We have filmed many videos together over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. But it's been a while. I think the last one we did was the Opaiula one, and we also did a giant water bug one at the same time, I think. And haven't filmed a new one since then, but we've probably done, I don't know, more than a dozen together. They're fun. Let's see. So Frank the Tank requests Gestroy or the Zingers. Okay. Vinkp would like to see one of the Opaiula tanks. Yeah, we could possibly make that happen too. All right, well, let me put these away and I'll get some Gestroy out. We'll take a look at those and we'll go from there. Let's see. Gestroy are one of my absolute favorites. Put these in a medium-sized display enclosure. You can see there are always some like hanging out in the open, unlike some other isopods. Like you don't see that a lot with the big pine key, Porcellionides virgatus big pine key, but with the Gestroy, it's not uncommon to see them hanging out like this. Most of the ones you can see now are adults. If I flip things around and look around, we'll probably see some other... Is that one molting or is that one dead? That doesn't look great. Let's see. There's some wee babies. It's so tiny, but if I can focus on it, you can see that even the tiny babies already start to have the pattern. Can you see that? I saw another baby or two somewhere, but it looks like they've taken off. Let me see if that individual... Yep, that individual has passed on, so I'm going to remove that. Doesn't need to be in there. That's too bad. It happens though. If I saw large numbers of them like that, I'd be worried. But I don't. There is... You can see several ages in there. Oh, there's something else going on there. What is that? There's a hitchhiker of some kind. Oh, I need to get that out of there. I'm not even sure what that is. But I'm going to get it out. Get a good look at it. Sorry everybody, I had to use my paintbrush to get this little hitchhiker out. I also accidentally got this little Gestroy out with the same paintbrush, so we're going to take a look at that little Gestroy. You can see It's tiny, but it's got the pattern. I love that they start out with the pattern very small. They don't lose it. In fact, the pattern just gets more vivid with age, which I absolutely adore. That is a major plus in my opinion. You have a species that does that. So what is this little one here? It looks kind of like a Porcelio scaber to me. Let's get a closer look at it. Yeah, I think that is. Does it have dark eyes? It's... There we go. Oh! That looks like it might be a piebald, because it's got some orange near the end. So... So Max Cantrell, I actually haven't had isopods in the Isoviva setup for a while. I just put that little Porcelio scaber in the lottery mix bin because I'm not entirely sure what it is. But it's probably either a piebald or something like that. I have had Tennyson, some that big, some of the Werneri that big. I don't have any Werneri that big now, but I have in the past. And I don't know if that's just because some of the bigger, older adults died off and the younger adults haven't reached that size yet or what, or if there's some condition in the enclosure that has reduced the average size, but they're not that big. But I have had them that big. And Tima, thank you for sharing the toe biter and pseudoscorpion vid on a bugs page. That's awesome. So Piers, you can tell if one is pregnant because on the underside there is, I'm trying to see if I have what I need to show you without hurting the isopod. I don't have what I need right now. A good way to do it, I learned from Easy Eddie, is you get a clear flat plastic container, something like that, like a petri dish, and you get a cotton ball, and you put the isopod in the petri dish or cotton ball, and then you gently restrain the isopod with the cotton ball, and then you can look at its underside through the petri dish, and then you can see. If they're pregnant or gravid, they have it's called a marsupium, or a pouch, that is form of oostegites, which mean like egg plates, basically. It's form of these fused oostegites, and the eggs form in there, and they develop in there, and then once they are ready to release their young, the oostegites kind of open, and the marsupium opens, and they come out. So I don't have the materials to show you that in a way that wouldn't possibly cause the female to rupture prematurely, the oostegites, and I don't want to do that, obviously. So I will try to show that in a future video when I have the materials right with me, because I don't right now. So Little Red Angel, yeah, you'll definitely want to get the dairy cow out of your Thai blue enclosure. You don't want that getting infected. That could be a problem, right? Infested. And it only takes potentially one, depending on its age and sex when it went in there. Oh, Toe, sorry to hear you had to liquidate your collection. That's always rough when you have to do that. Oh, and Tennyson, I bet that has something to do with it too. Maybe food availability is so abundant in with the hissers and so on. Yeah. Lots of frass and protein, space. Makes sense. Hey, look at the little baby Gestroy. Looks like there's several cohorts of babies in there. Looks like, I mean, I do have leaf litter in here, but they're going through it. I better add another chunk to it. there's one thing in the hobby people probably don't do enough. It's probably they don't add enough leaf litter to their enclosures. There we go. Now you can't really see them, but there we go. Let me see if I can put this back without causing too many troubles. And how much time do we have? We have about 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to deliver you over to the Opaiula tank here. Let me put my microphone back on, if I can. This is... lost my microphone again. This is not my largest Opaiula tank, but this is the one that's produced. It's one of the longest established tank in this room. It's been going for, I don't know, 10 years or something. I have other tanks that have been going for longer. Let's take a look. You can see some opie in the corner here. Yeah, I love the fermentation of the leaves in water is really helpful for the isopods. So Piers, I have purchased leaf litter and I have collected it. I generally collect it in my backyard because my backyard is large. I do not spray my trees with any sort of pesticide. I don't spray my lawn with any sort of pesticide. And so I also know that my neighbor on one side does not do that either. So I know where the safe zones are to collect leaves, and it's worked for me really well that way for years. I also have a wide variety of leaves. I also go up into the canyon and collect oak leaves once in a while to add, because I don't have any oak trees here, but there are a bunch of gamble oak trees in the hills nearby, so I will collect those and use those as well. But you just have to make sure you don't have any that are infested with pesticides. So this tank is a 10-gallon tank. You can see that there is a lot of the macroalgae growing in here. There's a lot of shrimp. There's a nice red looking one right now, right in the middle of the screen. Hopefully you can see that. And you can see some Malaysian trumpet snails. The Malaysian trumpet snails do breed in the brackish water. They've been acclimated to it for many years, but they don't overbreed. They just breed to a nice number, so that I can collect some when I need them. There's a baby one. You can see some babies floating in the water. There are almost constantly babies in this water. Can you see the larval shrimp floating with their heads down? They're basically planktonic at this stage for about 2 weeks, and then they settle down. They molt and settle down and become more like the adults. You can see a few snails on the back, more babies. So one thing is that you want to collect oak leaves not from trees that have been cut down, but trees that from leaves that have naturally fallen off the tree, because the chemical composition is going to be different, and using the green leaves can cause you some problems. I haven't used hackberry. How do you say your name? Scully? I'm not familiar with the use of hackberry, so I can't comment on that one. So Major WD, you just asked about the setup in here. Let's give you a little tour of the whole setup. It's not terribly, it's not set up to be necessarily the most attractive setup, but I kind of like it. It's mostly utilitarian. So there's a bunch of lava rock. That's all lava rock on the left there, a big pile. Smaller pile on the other side there. Then there's a lot of macroalgae growing in there. And then, let's see, there's the Malaysian trumpet snails and there's the shrimp. And I have reduced the numbers of shrimp in here because I've been removing them to ship to people. There's still probably a couple hundred in here, but I don't know, I probably removed, I don't know, hard to guess, 300 in the past 6 months maybe, I don't know. There were so many. And I set up some other, I've set up some other Ophiulia tanks recently too. And the substrate is aragonite. You can see some of it down here. It's just like oolitic aragonite. That's what we got there. Just right over here is my newest Ophiulia setup. Well, not my newest large one. This one is just maturing. This is a 20-gallon long, and you can see there are some shrimp in there, but there are only about 30 shrimp in this huge tank. You can see some of them on the lava rock there. I apologize for the algae on the glass. I need it right now. I'm not going to scrape it off because the tank's still maturing, but you can see there's a few Malaysian trumpet snails, a little bit of macroalgae, lots of tracks in the sand from the snails mostly, and more snails and more shrimp. Like I said, only about 30 shrimp. They're not very active yet. Once the colony matures, I could have easily 1,000 in here without even straining the setup. So pretty excited about that when it matures completely. I had to wait till algae began growing before I added any shrimp, and I did. But usually they go through a period where they don't do much as they acclimate if you only use that many shrimp. If I added, say, 200 shrimp to this enclosure, you'd see a lot more activity. So let's see. And yeah, the snails are very, very adaptable, and they do exist in brackish habitats in the wild, whether that's 100% natural or they were introduced to them and adapted to them. But they do exist in brackish habitats. I remember finding some shells of these on a beach in Hawaii when I lived there from the river that was flowing into, that periodically flowed into the water at that beach. Finding some shells of them, and I don't know how much salt they ended up getting, but probably some. Tell them how long I've been keeping this species. Since 2005, or 2004 actually. 2004, I think. So, yeah, more than 20 years now. Peter says red cat food is good along with dried shrimp. Good, bad info. Cat food for isopods to eat? So, Little Red Angel, what type of shrimp do you have? See, this one's not as exciting to watch as this one, I think, because there's fewer shrimp. Let's see. And I have a few more Ophiulia tanks in this room, but they're further away. And then I have several more downstairs, and then I have one in my office as well. So I don't even know. How many Ophiulia tanks do I have in my house? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think 7 or 8 with shrimp in them, and 3 that are cycling still to put shrimp in them, and then one in my office. Okay. So Piers, I use dog food for mine. You could use cat food. Just make sure not to overfeed what they can eat in a short period of time. But cat food is a supplementary food, one of many. You could totally do that. So all right. So Little Red Angel, your cherry reds, okay, yeah. Amanos, bamboos, and vampires, all cool shrimp. I have kept amanos. I currently have an amano shrimp. I have kept neocaridina, so red cherries and various other colors. I haven't done vampire shrimp or bamboos though. Let's see. So Major W asked, how long would it take for a population establishment tank like that from 30 individuals? Kind of depends, but once they start breeding, it won't be long. I might get 10, 15 babies from each female. So in another year, this tank could have hundreds in it if I don't add any more. My plan is to add another 30 or so in the next little while just to give it a jump start. And All right, so we are going to call it a day. Our time is up. We've had our 60 minutes. But thank you everyone for joining in. I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate all the participation. I'm glad you enjoyed the Opaiula as well as the Isopods today. And we'll catch you on the next one, which will be at noon my time, as this one was, from noon to 1 my time on Monday next week. Have a good one.